too many. Oh, there we go. We're live, I think. Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Hopefully, we didn't leave you waiting too long. StreamYard, which is the platform I use to stream, was, I guess there was a lot of traffic and it didn't like us trying to come on. So I appreciate the patience and the grace. If you're out there, please say hello. This is our first session of loss, and we hope to um, give you some inspiration, information, and this is an open space. And we are very grateful to welcome Janelle to our session today. Janelle, thank you. You are my first guest.
I am honored to be here.
I am so blessed that you said yes to the answer to the ask. This is really a topic near and dear to my heart because I learned a lot of things going through my own critical loss, which is interesting because it's not the first time I had gone through loss, but it really was the one that I would say kind of shook my world a bit. So I appreciate your grace and your willingness to talk to all of us. Before we dive into the topic, if you want to share a little bit with the audience about you and how we met.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we could say we're work colleagues, I suppose.
Yes. Mhm.
I'm a firm believer in people crossing paths at the right time. And I think that, our paths have crossed, and it's not by accident. So I work for a company called Achieve Unite. And there's very little degrees of separation, and you and I became partners very quickly. And I feel like we just had a real instant connection, and so it's our partnership has sort of bled into some of your work that you do outside of the work that you do with Achieve Unite. So that's that.
Yes.
And I
Yes.
do want to apologize as we're live that I'm a bit under the weather. So if I'm difficult to understand, I apologize. My voice is a little out of the ordinary.
Yeah, and that's even something I'm even more grateful for, right? I was thinking about that this morning. I'm like, I don't have a backup plan if
I
she's
would
sick or
never
if something happens to the kids.
well, that-
Yeah. No, thank you, thank you, thank you. I also have shared previously with the audience my intentions for holding space for other people's losses. I want to make sure I give you time to share your intentions in coming forward to talk about your experience with loss.
Yeah, so I think just talking about not being afraid to talk and share is something that could be used as a coping mechanism in itself. I think that when you do have a loss in any form, it's something that people around you want to tiptoe around. And, do you ask about it? Do you not? Do you talk about if it's a person that's the loss, do you talk about that? And I think that I am the person now, having gone through some significant losses, I'm not afraid to talk about it. And I think that when I do engage with somebody that is on the other end of it, um, they're refreshed, like, oh my gosh, thank you for asking about this. Or you could just see the look of relief on their face that they're allowed to talk about it. Because I think that you know if you do suffer a loss, you get stuck in this social parameter of like, I only have X amount of time to grieve, or I should be moving past this sooner. And so I just think engaging with one another and displaying that empathy and understanding, and just giving people that space to talk, or not if they choose not to, is helpful.
Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And you actually mentioned something super interesting just now is about the different types of losses, right? I've known people and I have myself, right, have mourned the loss of a pet, right?
Yeah.
Or the loss of,
A
um,
friendship,
yeah, friendship.
a
Yes.
lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
life
Yep.
can change on a dime, and whatever that reason is, you are mourning the loss of what was normal to you,
Mhm.
hence the term new normal, having to figure that out. So yeah, I think there's all kinds of loss, and I think that as we're engaging in this conversation, we'll talk about sort of those pinnacle losses that maybe paved the way for, you and I to each individually handle those other subsequent losses that have come our way. But there were certainly, for me at least, you know, a large loss that really rocked my world, that really um, just caused me to, I'm a really self-reflective person.
Mhm,
We talked about
mhm.
this. I was the psych major, even though I'm not, I,
Yes.
don't necessarily use it every day. Well, I probably do, but my point is I'm pretty introspective. And so, I always, in any obstacle that comes my way, I truly, truly try to, take a step back at some point. It may not always reveal itself in the immediate, but I do try to, see what I can take from this or what can I learn from this.
Mhm, mhm.
So I think that there was the one big loss for me that has then set the stage for, how I cope with subsequent losses.
Yeah, and let's actually talk a little bit about that, right? Let's give our audience listening in, whether it's on the live or the replay, a little bit of context of kind of
Sure.
your loss that taught you so much.
Yeah, so I lost my father. It's been 11 years now, but I was only 30,
Mhm,
and I felt like at that point in my life, I still very much needed my dad, and I really feel like it was a time where I really appreciated him as a person. I think we go
mhm,
through life seeing your parents as a parent.
mhm,
They're
mhm.
mom, they're
Yeah.
just dad. But
Mhm,
when you have the opportunity to actually get to know them and see them as just another person, that's when you can really engage as a friend, truly,
mhm,
right? And at that stage in my life, while he was still parenting me in a lot of ways, he was a friend, he was a confidant. And so, and I felt like we were really, really just coming into that. And then he became ill. And so,
mhm,
um, that part of the loss was really felt for me, of that, like, I still need you. I still need you in my life. I still need you to help guide me. And, who's going to be my go-to person? My dad was, I grew up in a very traditional home with pretty specific, gender roles. And so
mhm,
my dad, I really appreciated his, strong masculine energy that he brought into my life. And I always knew that, he was the guy that I could go to, that I could count on, and would help me solve my problems. And that might have just simply been through talking, like brainstorming. And so that was a massive loss suffered for me. I think, in my family and in my environment, I really sort of stepped into that role as the problem solver. And, I'm everyone's person. And I felt like I was left without, my go to person really to deal with some of that stuff. And I have a really close relationship with my mom as well. I mean, my mom's wonderful and truly a sounding board and all of the above, but just a very different relationship. So it was, I don't want to discredit what I, her like that, but yes, it was a massive blow. So, he became ill and we went through this roller coaster of health for 5 years. He battled really, really hard. And I was able to work from home a lot. And so I really, my coping mechanism was really to dive into his care. I assembled a medical team. I, was there for every doctor appointment. Um, I'm definitely a type A, so maintaining a semblance of control is really what helped me. And there were times where my dad had cancer, and it was a unique type of cancer. And there were these times where I just felt throughout his illness, like if I just worked harder, like as I knew it was so unrealistic, but there's this very small part of you that's like, okay, my effort, I'm going to help cure cancer and I'm just going
mhm,
to get better, I mean, and I
yeah,
knew that that wasn't ever going to happen, but there was a sliver of my head that was like, I need to do everything I can to buy another day.
mhm,
So, I mean, I was in most of his work, as I am in just outside of Chicago. I mean, my father's care was at University of Chicago Medical Center.
okay.
It was
Mhm,
fantastic. I was joining their Cancer Research Foundation board. I was doing everything I could to educate myself, involve myself in ways that could potentially affect him in his care and preserving his life as much as we could. So it became a job, outside of the
mhm,
job that I was doing. It became a part-time job for me. And, that's the other thing, is that when, it came down to it finally and he succumbed to his illness, my life was sort of like, what do I do now? Like, I don't have that workload anymore.
Yeah.
And so, it's such a multi-layered approach, grief, right? I mean, grief itself, excuse me, is the multi-layered approach that you have to take to it. Not only have you suffered this loss of this person,
Yeah.
but all of the ways that that loss is affecting your life. And so for me, I was like, what am I going to do with I don't have to go to University of Chicago anymore. Like, these people were like extended family. I spent several Thanksgivings there, and
Mhm.
so it was really really wild. I really kind of had to um compartmentalize all of those different aspects of it to deal with one thing at a time, you know? And I once had a fantastic, wise therapist tell me that it's like they referred life to photography. And he was like, sometimes you just have to take things one frame at a time. Um,
Mm.
and so,
Ooh.
I think in those initial days of loss, it was just one frame at a time, and that was okay. Um,
Mhm.
taking things slow and um, just taking it in waves, because that's what it is. It's definitely a journey.
Yeah, cancer has such an interesting. So, I've had my own
Yes.
journey with cancer, and you talked about spending the Thanksgivings, and the medical team becomes part of your extended family.
Yeah.
And yeah, I did feel a little guilty that after my mom passed, I was like, oh, I have all this time back,
Yeah.
right? And I felt a little bit, because like you, right, control freak and doing all this stuff, right? To it's what helped me, right? Other people do other things, but it was what helped me as well. But yeah, they became family. They became, and
Yes.
it is an interesting bond, um, that kind of you carry wherever, and cancer just kind of touches. I think people, no matter what type of cancer, I think it touches you and changes you in different ways that you never expected. Um, and do you feel that loss 11 years later, that loss and that experience of losing your dad still is very much present? Because some people have this misconception of, oh, time, that time heals all wounds. And I haven't found that to be true, but
No,
um,
yes, absolutely. And I think time heals all wounds is a farce. I think all the time does is put separation between
Mhm,
you and the event that kind of shook your world. And I think in that time you can be constructive and you can
mhm,
heal in a way. So I'm not, but I do think it doesn't. Time doesn't heal all wounds. It
mhm,
just calluses you, and
mhm,
I think it strengthens you. I don't
mhm.
think it heals you, though. I think that um, yeah, I mean, because I'm never going to sort of get over the loss. I'm never,
Right.
it's a painful thing to think that it's been 11 years since I've seen his face,
Yeah.
live and in person.
Mhm.
But I think I've used that time to explore and be reflective and learn. And, here I am today being able to talk about it in a really constructive way. And I think that for me, I get such satisfaction out of being able to be relatable to
Mhm.
somebody else that might be able to use my experience and say, I'm going to be okay. I'm going to get through it. But no, you never stop. I feel like you never stop missing that
Yeah.
person or longing to have them back in your life. I think that that's just an absolute normal part of
Mhm.
suffering loss.
Yeah. And tomorrow's Father's Day, so happy
Yeah.
Father's Day to
Yeah,
Dad in heaven.
and
What was his name?
Roger.
Roger.
And
Okay.
I will
Thank
say that I think that those milestones, for me at least,
Mhm,
day to day are, totally fine. Like, I'm good. I can, at
mhm,
this point in my life, I remember him, like, I sit now and remember him fondly, as opposed to
mhm.
sitting and in just total despair. I can
Right.
really look at those happy times and
Mhm,
utilize those memories to help me get through. But these, holidays, particularly like Father's Day, for whatever reason, it does get to me. I try to stay off social media,
mhm.
because it's just so bittersweet to see all of the, testimonies about these great fathers, and I had a really great one,
Yeah.
and while I'm so lucky, it's like there's just this weird pang of pain, on Father's Day. Same with the anniversary of his death. I swear it's just this like fog that sets in our home, and everyone feels it around me. It's just like we just can't escape it. He died January 3rd. So it was very interesting, like right at his death. While he was ill, the death itself was a bit fast and unexpected. So we had Christmas gifts for him that year. Um, and he did get, right, he went in the hospital December 18th and never came home. So we didn't celebrate Christmas that year until after he died, because life was just so insanely busy, as you know, dealing with the death and all that comes with that. And so he died January 3rd. So it's still like there have been years where my family and I just try to get out of town. Like we celebrate Christmas and then we go on a vacation, because it's not, it's fun, and it, is a good distraction as opposed to just being home and being able to feel that fog and that weight of the loss on us. So I think that's a tip. I think you find distractions. But then, like on his birthday, we really celebrate him. I
Mm,
get his favorite birthday cake, and
mm,
sort of toast him and remember, what a great man he was, and it feels happy. It's like it's sad, but it's like we were so lucky to know him and have him in our lives, and um, so it's different. It's interesting, and that's my experience. I think for the next person, it might be completely different. I think certainly at the beginning of your journey of loss, I'm making it sound a lot easier than it is right now, but it's not, and I think that's something to know as well. It's completely okay to be sobbing and wanting to be isolated on those
yeah.
certain days at the very beginning, because it's just so difficult to wrap your head around that. Initially my birthday was something that was kind of difficult. My dad had traditions with me. I'm in tech, right?
Yes.
I'm afraid of technology, and growing up in the generation that I'm a part of, we were the last of the kids that
Mm,
uh, computers were just being introduced, right, and into
mhm,
school. And,
right.
cell phones were just being introduced by the time
Yeah.
I was, mid high school era. So my dad, I was never afraid of it. I was always somebody that was so intrigued, and my dad was too. I can remember him when we got our first computer in our house. My father would stay up till like 2 or 3 in the morning learning the operating system, because
Oh,
he was
wow.
determined to know computers.
Mm,
So every Christmas, every birthday, my mom always did most of the shopping, but my father would go out and he would get his own very special gift for me, and it was always a piece of technology.
oh,
I was I'm an early adopter of Apple.
adopter. Yes.
Adopter, judge me if you will, but I'm
Nope.
an
Nope.
Apple person. And so he got me the very first iPod that came out, and
Wow.
the very first iPhone, and, I mean, just various things, but always a piece of technology. And that was a sense of very funny, I think, coming from the generation that he came from, having
Uh-huh.
me as his daughter that was not afraid of those things was a real sense of pride for him. So
Uh-huh.
he loved doing that. And, so initially on my birthday it was kind of like, oh, who's gonna buy me my tech now, it's like sad that it would remind me
Mhm,
of like that was a
mhm,
really special thing,
uh-huh.
um so I don't know.
I love how you go through the rituals, right? One of the things that I would recommend for people, and someone actually, this is not an original thought, somebody gifted this thought to me, was, one of the counselors told me,
Yeah.
have a ritual
Yes.
that you, you know, do to remember, to commemorate. Um, and so I love your ritual of the birthday cake.
Yes.
What's the flavor? What was Roger's favorite?
He loved atomic cakes. I don't know if you.
What's that?
So it's actually they can be difficult to find, and it
Okay.
it sounds really gross to some people, but I think I love it. So it's a multi-layer cake, and you have a layer of banana cake.
Okay.
In between the layers are different flavors. So you have custard, like an eclair custard,
Uh-huh.
and it will be chocolate cake with a layer of fresh strawberries. And then it's like a yellow cake. And I think it's banana. So I think in between the banana and the chocolate, it's bananas, then strawberry, and then the custard. And then just whipped cream on top. It's exposed on the sides, and
Oh,
it's
wow.
delicious. But think of it as like the Neapolitan of cake.
Okay. So do you have to have it custom made?
No, there are local bakeries that have them in their
Oh,
cases, and so thankfully I can just go and pick one up and, um, you know, literally we eat like a
I
slice,
love
so it's
that.
not getting thrown away, but it's, just still the way
Yeah.
to commemorate him and,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
And
so
Roger taught me something new today about cakes
atomic
because I didn't even know that
yeah,
an
yeah.
atomic
Yeah.
birthday cake.
And I think, I I think again, as we're talking about advice and the point of this is really to share and
Mhm.
hope that people can gain something out of this is, I think I'm grateful that I had my eyes open the whole time. I
Mm,
really feel like while my journey with him was very, very difficult and such a roller coaster of emotions, I was very I was very aware of time. I always like to say, time is I was given the gift of time through tragedy is what I say. I really
ooh,
value time.
mhm,
And unfortunately I don't know that, there's really any other way to fully appreciate time
wow,
than through
mhm,
tragedy. And so I really did. I really just absorbed every moment that I could with him. And uh, I often reflect, would I if I had a choice, would I have rather lost him suddenly or, because watching him die slowly, he was a very strong man. And so to watch him degrade over
yeah,
time, really difficult. And, he took every opportunity to do the same with me. So he would walk me through the house and just make sure I knew everything that he would take over, or had take like that I was going to have to take over. He made sure that I was as prepared for as possible.
mhm,
Finances, he made sure I
mhm,
knew where every single account was. And he would even say like, I know that my mom's a very emotional person. I tend to be a little bit more stoic.
mhm,
And, so he knew that, and he would tell me, like, "I know mom is gonna be a mess when I go. I know you're gonna be strong. You're gonna be strong." And there would be times that we would talk, and my dad would be like, "Don't cry. We knew this was an inevitability. Don't cry. Like, you and I are tough." And, he would say, I mean, that was kind of a mantra throughout my
yeah,
life. He would always say that I was so tough.
mhm,
So he'd be like, "You're tough. Like, don't cry. We knew that this was coming, but we have to talk about these things." And so it was really, there were times where I was like, what is wrong with him? Like, this is torture. Why would he do this to me? Why
it's
would he say this? But, in hindsight now, I'm like, gotta, as a parent for him, like how brave of him to be able to do that as well. I can't even imagine how difficult that was to have
yeah,
to talk to your child knowing that you're going to leave them and you don't want to.
mhm,
And so he did. He took every opportunity to prepare me for his absence. And so and I look back on that and I'm like, he had taken care of me even in his afterlife.
yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
yeah.
I love that you addressed that point, right? I do hear and have gotten asked the question of what do you think is best, sudden or slow, and I feel that the cancer was such a blessing for us.
Yeah, you
Um,
got that
be,
time.
we got that time, and we got that time almost like concentrated
Yes.
because you are in this heightened state of it could be the last word or the last kiss or the last hand holding could be the last,
Yeah.
right? um, and you have a different appreciation, and not just for
Mhm.
the interaction with them but generally for the interaction with
Absolutely.
other people.
Yes.
um, the other thing though that I think it's a myth, at least it was for me, and even in my other losses, my grandmother was 89 when she passed from dementia. She went, and my dad died of liver failure after many years of abusing alcohol. um, Even though you know that it's inevitable.
Yes. It's still a shock.
Yes,
Very
yes,
shock. Yes.
yeah,
Well,
yes,
I mean, I feel like, gosh, how much time do we have? Can talk about so much of this, but like, I think the death process itself is an interesting one, and
mm,
having to see that up close in person, and to go through that is a harrowing experience.
mhm,
Um, so yeah, I like you. I definitely apply that lesson of time and appreciation, and I'm not perfect. There's certainly
Yeah,
times where I feel ill will towards people. I get mad,
of
we just
course.
have
We
disagreements,
all do.
but
Yeah.
I genuinely, um, appreciate people around me, and I'm selective in my circle, and I'm just deliberate. I'm much more
I
deliberate.
love that word.
You
Yes,
know?
because that's
Yes,
yes.
I'm much more deliberate in the decisions that I'm making, with the people that I'm surrounding myself
Mhm.
with, how I'm treating them, the efforts. I think for me, it kind of, I love the conversation about adult friendships and how difficult that can be as an adult to
Mhm.
maintain and make new friendships. And I mean, I think I use my loss experiences, and apply them to adult friendships. It is really difficult, but I make the effort. I'm this person that, I can be exhausted, but I'm like, send the text. Just send the text to check
Yeah.
in on somebody and be like, hey, I haven't talked to you in a while. Let's grab coffee. Just be the one to make the initiative. I think we get caught in that. And I'm not trying to derail this conversation, but you do get caught sometimes as
Yeah.
an adult feeling like, well, she hasn't called me in a while and I'm really busy. And and then the next thing a year's gone by before you may have talked, to that friend. And so I am deliberate. I'm deliberate, and no, we have to make the effort if we want these people in our lives. So it's interesting, again, I'm constantly evolving, and that's what I want to do. If I wasn't, then I'm all about growth and seeing that in myself. And I think that this loss has allowed for, exponential growth for me as a person. And so, for that, I'm grateful. And I look at that, and I feel like, again, that is where, I'm still gaining lessons from my dad,
Yeah.
and then, I've learned so much from his particular loss and the experience, again, being able to have really difficult conversations with him, leading up to it. And just getting a really realistic perspective. Again, I think he was trying, he prepared me for even the emotional side of it. Like,
Mhm.
this is
Mhm.
how you can deal with this. And
Yeah.
I mean, it was, and it may not be for everyone. And certainly everyone's not afforded that luxury of that time.
Yeah.
But there are definitely days throughout my process where I felt like I wish he would have just died of a heart attack, because I
Mhm.
did have a
Yeah,
close
of course.
relationship with him, and there
Mhm.
really wasn't anything that needed to be said.
Yeah.
It was more about preparation.
Mhm.
But as far as the warm and fuzzy and that was already taken care of on a daily
Mhm.
basis. I grew up in a close family. My father and my mother were very affectionate, always told me they loved me. I never had a falling out with them that I needed to repair. So yeah, there have definitely been times too where I felt like I just wish that I didn't. I mean, to have to see that,
Mhm.
because again, I'm mentioning the death process. Those are part of the core memories of this loss, of actually seeing the process, and what he looked like, and kind of what
Yeah.
he was reduced to, and the trauma of the loss. Because, like you mentioned, it is a shock, even though when you're dealing with an illness, the shock of, selfishly having someone, while they might be ill and frankly miserable, selfishly, they're still in your presence. And it
Mhm.
still does something for,
Yeah.
your psyche, of just knowing that they're there. And so when that's ripped from you,
Yeah.
it's incredibly traumatic. And so, there have definitely been the times where I've just been like, oh God, it would have been easier if you just died of a heart attack, and
Yeah. Yeah.
I would have been able to rip that Band-Aid off quicker, and gotten into the nitty-gritty of the grief. But I don't know. Either
Yeah.
way, difficult.
I can relate, but definitely, uh, I because I've felt that way, so I can relate.
Yeah.
But I always kind of talk myself down from that and be like, no,
Yes.
I am
I
so
agree. Great.
grateful. Yeah,
Yes.
so grateful. Um, I I I don't even know how to ask this, but has the lessons that you learned from losing Roger and how he prepared you, has that prepared you for other losses? And you, like you said, there's different types of losses, so it doesn't have to be another person. It could be other types of
Yeah,
losses. Has
absolutely. Yeah, he has. And there was something my dad would always say. So again, he had cancer. He had multiple primary sites. That's something that, simultaneously, that's something that made him unique. And so he went through a lot of really, his treatment was very vigorous, and just difficult on him physically. And so, again, my dad was a very stoic, stalwart man. He would undergo cancer or chemotherapy and radiation, and then I would drive him to University of Chicago, and my mom and I would drop him off back at work, and he would limp into
wow,
work, and yeah, it was crazy. So,
wow.
he retired on January 1st and he died January 3rd.
Oh
So,
my goodness
but for my
gracious.
dad, it was somebody he did that because it really helped keep his mind where he needed to be.
Mhm,
So he would often say to me, he'd be like, Janelle, there's a beginning and an end to everything. And, not only did he apply that to his own life, but in turn, but also his treatment. So he would tell me, like, this is miserable. Like, I hate it. It's miserable, but I continuously remind myself while I'm, sitting in a radiation tube or I'm, getting chemo infused into my veins, like, this is going to end. There's a beginning and an end. And so I think that for me, I use that I mean, almost daily, to
mhm,
reminder of things. And I apply that in so many different ways. And I think for me, it's helped up, set better expectations for the amount of control that I can have over certain things. There's a beginning and an end, and I cannot control a lot of the things that happen. And so as I apply that to other losses, some that haven't been deaths, for example, like the loss of a best friend,
mhm.
you know, I cannot control some of the things that were going on in her life, for
Mhm.
example,
Yeah,
that drew us apart. I cannot control that. And so, that is where I remember, beginning and an end.
yeah.
And it's out of my control. And all I can do is, try to learn from this experience. So absolutely, I still, you know, have a lot of those mantras echoing in my head. And, um, now that being said, I have my mother who's aging,
Mm,
and I think as we let I think this is an interesting turn in the conversation is because then now, how do I prepare for another loss?
yeah.
I don't think as much as I've learned from this loss, losing parents are unique. I think
Mm,
well, every loss in your life is unique, but they all offer a very, very different experience. I will say
mhm,
that because, like you, I've lost grandparents before
mhm.
my father, and I experienced that, and it was difficult. It was sad. I was close to my grandmother, for example, but nothing would have prepared me for
Yeah.
losing a parent.
Mhm.
And I don't think it matters how old you are.
Yeah.
It's a blow.
Mm,
Now, and I think again, there's varying degrees, like loss of a spouse is a completely other different plane. And I think the most unimaginable would be loss of a child, personally.
mhm, mhm.
Um, so that being said, I have an aging mother who I'm very close with, and it's my only parent. And while I'm an adult and very independent, successful, that is still going to, that thought of being an orphan, if you will,
Yeah. Yeah.
will hit me very hard. I mean, my mom's somebody I talk to every single day, and but I get, but I will, that is where I will have to really apply. I will really have to be deliberate. Again, there's that word in applying all of the lessons that I have learned, in that. But I do think that's going to be one that's going to shock me and rock my world again.
Yeah.
Uh, and I'll just have to do the best I can with what I've been given. But, um, again, I think that I love the opportunity to kind of pay it forward, and I always look at I'm never somebody that asks why. You
Mm,
can't ask why has this
yep,
happened to me. You're never going to
yep,
get that answer. It's just going to keep
yep.
you in the depths of despair.
Mhm.
Instead, I look for, how can this be a constructive opportunity? And I truly mean that. And again, it doesn't happen right away, but, after I give myself time and I work through the things that I need to work through is when I really start looking at how can this be constructive? And all of that working through process is
Yeah.
constructive. You get so much out of that. But I truly look for what have I learned out of this and how have I grown,
Mm,
um, out of any loss. So I
yeah.
think that's really good advice personally. I think you have to do that. You have to be deliberate and seeking that and what can I learn from this? What have I taken? How have I grown? How do I want to grow? Um,
Mhm.
I think that's the best we can hope for as human beings, evolving in this world is growing.
Yeah. And helping to shepherd other people through,
Absolutely.
right? Again, the experience is different for everybody,
Yeah.
but there are some things. I know for me, my husband was a huge support system,
Yeah.
and I- in many different ways. Even my daughter, who also lost her grandma, they were very close. Very, they had a very close relationship. So, what were your support systems that you felt like really helped you get through?
I mean, honestly, well, I had people around me,
Mhm.
um, for example, my mother, my mom was we were all so young, when my dad died, and so, that was something, the funeral home director. My father was in hospice, and it was he's a lovely man, the funeral director. But when he came in to retrieve my father's body to take him to the funeral home, he walked out, and my sister is a C level. She's in hospital administration, and so at the
Okay.
time, she knows a lot of those people as they're coming
Right.
to the hospital to take people. So he knew my sister, and so maybe that is why he was so candid. But he came out and he looked at my mom and sister and I, and he was like, oh god, he was so young. My dad was only 64 when he died.
Yeah.
Like, he's young, and he's like, you're all so young. And we're like,
Thank
yeah,
you. Don't keep rubbing it in. Yeah. Yeah.
move on to this process, please. But yes, thank you, Captain Obvious. We are.
Yeah.
um, so kind of funny now in
Yeah.
hindsight.
Yeah. Yeah.
But so everyone, my mom had a very, very difficult time,
Yeah.
and I I I think my answer isn't going to be as inspirational as it should
It's
be.
okay.
I don't think I really had a real strong support system.
Mhm.
I think that
Mhm.
I was forced to kind of turn inward
Yeah.
and really kind of pull up my bootstraps and figure stuff out.
Yeah.
I tried to be there as much as I could for my mom, but I was still very much the grieving child,
Mhm.
and there were times that my mom would listen, but ultimately, it would result in both of us being, really upset. And I feel like what I really needed was somebody to just be really stoic and strong for me. And I think that kind of it made it full circle for that loss for me, because that person that would have done that for me was the
Was
one
Roger.
I lost.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I did. I had to I had to rely on myself a lot for that and getting through it. I mean, and you have friends, but I think, again, as you're going through grief, and this is where I try to be a little different, is I think everyone around you, typically in a loss, they flock to you immediately, to
Mhm. They mean well.
they mean well, I think, but life goes on for everyone, right? I mean, they're
Yeah.
not the ones that have suffered that loss, and life does go on, and people then sort of scatter, and it's not with ill intention, it's just a process of moving on. But you still very much feel that loss, and so I, that happens a lot,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
for me, I don't try to hover now. I just though try to check in, and that is where I feel comfortable
Yes.
being blatant and saying, "How are you doing?" Or, "I know today must be difficult. I'm thinking of you. Like, do you want to talk about the person? Do you want, I'm not afraid to address that with someone. And, but I'm gentle too. I mean, I ask, are you comfortable doing this? But because I know that feeling of like, well, everyone was there. And now I'm a little, feeling isolated because now
Yeah.
everyone's just gone.
Yeah.
Um, so, um, so yeah, I did. I kind of had to
Yeah.
dig deep and just take things one frame at a time. I had another really great analogy given to me once.
Yeah.
And I, again, psych major, so I come across a lot of therapists, and I'm grateful for that. And there was an individual that I worked with who his training was in pastoral therapy. So it was very
Hmm.
spiritual based, which was
Okay.
unique. And he had done some of his training at a monastery in Italy. And
Okay.
there was this statue of a little boy helping turtles to some water. And that was, well, it was a two-part statue. So, sort of the bath that the turtles were going to get into
Mhm.
and the boy were the two separate. And when they went to assemble it, there weren't enough turtles to get to they hadn't made enough turtles. And so he would say to me, you just have to make more turtles, just make more turtles. And I thought it was so clever. Turtles have a lot of symbolism if you look into it. And so, I liked that too, that you just have to make more turtles.
Yeah.
And I did that. I just had to make more turtles and get through, those difficult days, and find things that distract you. And,
Mhm.
eventually that, builds muscle memory and creates a habit, and that becomes your new normal and your new life. And it doesn't mean you forget that person. It doesn't mean that you don't honor them in those ways, but it's part of the healing process, because you can't just sit and dwell, and wallow in that. You just
Yeah.
can't, um, if you want to be able to maintain your health.
Mhm.
Because I think that when we do that, then you'll see the physical effects of grief, and
Mhm.
that becomes a dangerous place to stay.
It's interesting because you said your answer wasn't hopeful, and I thought it was perfect
Really?
because not everybody has, because there is no ideal,
No. No,
right?
it isn't.
Um, and that's one of the reasons I want to do this, right? Is that it looks different for every single individual. I couldn't speak for 30, a little bit over a month. I didn't want the people around me. I didn't want people calling me. I didn't, I remember some of my family members like calling every day, and my aunts and my uncles, and how you doing? And it's like, I just, please don't, I
Yeah.
can't even, right? I Don't ask me the question, right? And
Yeah,
it just don't even talk to me because it requires effort for me to speak,
just didn't
right?
have. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so, yeah, I definitely, I
I felt like that
appreciate
was
the
my
candor.
mom was like that. That was kind of
Mhm,
the way she tended to be, which,
mhm,
is difficult. Like, at again, the role that I served was very
uh-huh,
difficult to watch that and to
mhm.
see that grief and not really be able to do anything. So I understand that, there might be that sense to just retreat.
Yeah, yeah. Which is, it's so funny, not funny, haha, but
No.
I'm a natural extrovert,
Yeah,
right? I'm
yeah,
always like, I walk in the room, I'm like,
yeah.
right?
I
And
relate. Yes, you are.
yeah. And it was so unlike my natural
Persona.
state.
Yeah,
And so I think that that's, again, people have certain expectations on how you should deal with things. And my mom had been sick for a long time as well. So it was like people are thinking, well, you should have been preparing for this. And it's like, nothing prepares you
there's
for that.
no
Right?
way to prepare
Yeah.
for it. I can tell,
Yeah.
yes, I can attest to
Yeah.
that. There is no
Yeah.
way.
Um, so
What
I
do
would,
you think it was for you that kind of got you out of that darkness of it?
um, uh, gosh,
I'm sorry I put you on the spot there.
no, 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 it's okay, because I'm still, the first thing that crossed my mind is, I'm not sure I'm out of it yet, but,
Okay,
um,
fair
yeah,
enough.
yeah, you kinda, some days are good, some days are bad,
Right, you just
right?
cope with it. You
Yeah,
just you just
yeah,
find the way.
yeah,
It becomes
yes,
just a part of your life, an integral part.
exactly. I think that's, I I have accepted it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so you reach a point of acceptance, which is one of the stages, of course, but, I also see, and this topic is so interesting to me because also I think COVID did something very interesting to people
Oh god,
collectively,
yes.
right? And because we don't talk about loss very frequently, and COVID was loss of so
Oh,
many things,
on so
right?
many different levels, yes.
Yes, and even people that have gone through loss, like, I'll give you an example, right? The death of my father, my grandfather, my grandmother, I was there for all of them. And by the time it got to my mom, I was very familiar. The body actually goes through a certain, so I forgive me if I'm getting too graphic or whatnot, but
Okay.
the body physiologically starts going through certain things in terms of, there's a certain gurgling that happens
Sure,
as
absolutely.
and
Death
there's,
rattle, they call it.
yes,
Yes.
yes,
Yeah, absolutely.
there's
But
all these things that occur, and
yes.
people don't ever talk about that. When it happened to my dad, I was very at a loss. But then when I saw it with my grandma, and then I saw it with my grandpa, and then as my mom started going through that physiological shutting down of her body, I knew, approximately, we have X amount of hours
Yes.
between this stage and this stage, and then another set of hours between this stage and this stage, right? Um, and so it might sound morbid, but it kind of prepares you in that regard. But people never talked about it. So it was and again, you don't have to talk about it so graphically. There's other types of loss, but I think that's the mental health crisis that we're going through right now, as a in the globe, right? If you look at,
Oh,
suicide rates are the highest that they've ever been across all age categories.
yeah.
um, and it's because we don't talk about some of these things in a very open forum,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, you're
um,
right. I mean, it's like being I had, so my father was in hospice, and
mhm,
that was his decision. He wanted to be at the hospice center, And the in-house doctor, my dad was transferred from University of Chicago. We kind of knew we had to throw up the white flag, and
Uh-huh.
he had to go into hospice. And the in-house doctor had pulled me aside, knowing the role I played in his care. And he was like,
Mhm.
I need you to fill in the gaps for me, because University of Chicago is telling us that he has like 2 to 3 months. And based on their notes, I would agree with that. But what we're seeing, my
Mhm.
father, he degraded incredibly quickly,
Mhm.
very fast when he got to the hospice center. I mean, it was
Mhm.
insane. And
Mhm.
so, talking to all of those signs of death, like
Yeah.
you, I had seen them before.
Right.
And I think for me, it actually created a lot of anxiety during that time, because I so desperately, it's like you saw the signs and I
Mhm.
just wanted to hold on tighter, because I
Yeah.
knew, I had the foresight of knowing
Yeah.
that it was right around the corner. And this doctor had said to me, he was like, I knew that we were on a train that, he's like, you need to prepare yourself that you're on a freight train and it
Yeah.
is going to crash very soon.
Yeah.
And it was such an analogy, because it is. It's like,
Yeah.
and you feel
Very
like
quickly. Yeah.
you're in that freight, and you feel that blow of that,
Mhm.
crash.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget as well, my father was, it was a very different death process than I'd experienced with, other loved ones. My
Mhm.
dad did not sort of slip into that peaceful coma and then
Mhm.
pass. He
Mhm.
was very conscious up until about the last hour of his death.
Mhm. Mhm.
Fought against it. I mean, he literally fought to his last breath to stay with us.
Mhm.
And in the midst of that, the doctor had come in to evaluate him. And he, with my dad being very aware and conscious, was like, I've looked through your file. And he said, you have fought this like a brave soldier. And he said, but I need you to understand that you are going to lose this war tonight. Do you understand that? You will lose. And it was incredible. And it was horrible to be there. That was my moment of,
Mhm.
you know, um, being rather unhinged, because
Yeah.
I was so desperate to hang on. But
Mhm.
there was my dad, so, still leading by example, just
Mhm.
shaking his head and saying, yes, I understand, and then we just had the opportunities to stay
Mhm.
with him, and, he continued to fight, and then
Mhm.
he had to succumb to it. But it was, excuse me, it was an incredible thing, and not in a good way, but
Yeah.
just
Yeah. Yeah.
incredible
Yeah. Yeah.
to see that before your eyes, and to, so those are things that I will never forget. And I don't necessarily ever wish that on somebody.
Yeah.
That was the cards that I was dealt.
Mhm.
But man, it has massively impacted me.
Yeah.
And from the standpoint of being able to look at him and see that level of strength and stoicism that was displayed, to just having to deal with the raw emotions of that. I mean, there's so much to take out of it. So
Yeah.
yeah, interesting.
Yeah. But again, even in that, there's a blessing, right?
Yeah,
Because
absolutely. It's a beautiful thing, and I
that's
think that that's somewhere to sort of segue towards the end of our talk. Some of
yes.
the time is
Yes.
just, there is a lot of beauty in death, and being able to
Yes.
grieve for somebody, and to understand that, I love the quote, and I think it becomes a little cliche, but I think it's true, that grief is just all of the love that you still have,
Mhm.
and it just has nowhere to go, right?
Mhm.
Because you don't have anyone, that person's not there to receive that
Yeah.
love. But that's what grief is. And so I think that when you get to a certain point, and you will eventually,
Mhm.
you're able to really see that beauty, and just
Yeah.
be so grateful that that person was in your life. And
Mhm.
it is a reality that we know we all don't, we're all going to die, and it's all going to end for us at some point. And you just hope that you're lucky enough to have that time to be able to go out gracefully and say your goodbyes, and leave your mark, in a positive way.
Yeah. Thank you. Just as we bear witness many times to people's lives, I think I've personally felt is an honor to bear witness to my loved ones passing, and I thank you for sharing your loss and your loss experience
Yeah,
of
I'm happy to
Roger.
be here. I
Uh,
feel like, what a great way to start our Saturday,
I
saying
know.
amazing
Well,
and
but
cathartic. Like, this is great.
yes,
Go on with
yeah,
your day, and
we
you
start in
cold.
yeah, starting gratitude. Your cold is going to look like
Yeah,
it's a
maybe
little thing.
I think my cold has come because it's been really busy and stressful, and so maybe I've just been able to kinda,
Yeah,
like, get rid of some of the stress this
let
morning.
it go. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Renee, you're awesome.
thank you so much. You've been a gift. I feel like calling your dad Captain Roger because he's like setting all the example, and um, he taught me about the atomic cake. And so,
Yeah.
uh, thank you
Oh,
for
you have to look
sharing.
it up now.
I know. I'm no kidding. I'm going to the Publix to go see if they have one. But thank you. Happy Father's Day to him, but happy
Yes.
Father's Day to your husband and any other fathers that you might have in your life, father-in-law or whatever. And I'm just forever grateful, and I appreciate you opening up so bravely.
Yeah,
Thank you.
happy to be here. No problem. Good
Thank
luck
you.
on this series. I think it's going to be fantastic.
Thank you for being our first guest. I
Have
appreciate it.
a great day. Bye, everyone.